Well, good afternoon, everybody. Real pleasure to meet you. My name is Bob Bannister, and I'm ship's captain, sort of kind of founder of iManage Performance Limited, and we've got 30 minutes of our lives together now. And I promise to do my best to create an engaging 30 minutes so it doesn't feel tiresome and hard work, and engage our brains a little bit in taking a journey, thinking really where I've come from during my life, and looking at those influences and things that have made me learn and been most helpful in my learning experience, and have subsequently become sort of core elements of what we do as an organization, in understanding need within an organization and in delivering human change through multiple learning interventions that we may all be involved in. So the first thing I would say as we get going together is please switch on your phones. I know that's kind of counterintuitive, not the usual thing you hear at the beginning of a presentation, but I am going to, well, there's two things, I suppose. One is if I can't hold your attention over this little device you've got in your pocket, then I'm not doing a good enough job, am I? Let's be fair. But actually, more importantly, I'm going to ask you during the session to tweet at certain points. If any of you have Twitter in your rows, to think about some ideas, work on that, so we can make it a bit interactive and we can share what we're saying to each other, and I can read out some of your thinking as well as the content that I put in. So if you've got Twitter, it's at iManage, probably one of the best learning development feeds in the world. I'm allowed to say that because I said probably at the beginning. I think I'm allowed to say that. So do connect with that and join in as we work through the session together. So this is the advert. This is the one and only piece of advert. I'll tell you for 30 seconds about us. We're a training company. We're a soft skills training company that work predominantly in management, leadership, organizational behavioral skills, communication, all that kind of area. And we've grown from a traditional organization delivering training face-to-face into an organization that has three strands to what we do. The traditional formal learning, that 10% piece, and that 70-20-10. 20% piece, we have an e-learning team. We produce bespoke e-learning for many of our clients. And then the 70% piece, the informal or social learning, we have a platform for that, thisworkwell.com, and we often include that in streams with our clients where we've got a real blend, a joined up blend. So different interventions, but one experience as a learner through, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's coaching, whether it's e-learning, whether it's social learning, it's all joined up. So that's kind of what we do. Q13, literally just around here. Love to talk to you afterwards. And that's advert over, yeah? If that's okay? So let's think about this idea of changing people for good. This really has been at the heart of what we've been doing for the last 17 years. As an organization, we're about 17 years old. And we started early on by making the claim to our prospects that if your people don't change as a result of any of our interventions, we've failed. You've wasted your learning budget, and we've not done a good enough job in understanding the need and bringing about the change. So we said, no change, don't pay us. You're cool. You don't have to quibble with us if you don't believe people are changing. Now that, in itself, forced us to get really specific about the way we understand the organization we're working with and the way we then construct the learning solution that it is delivered. Now that applies to you. So whoever you are, what we're going to look at now in the next 30 minutes is the idea of how do I take these various needs in our organizations and how do I convert that into genuine learning change within individuals. I suppose changing people for good has, in my head, had two meanings. Changing people for the better and changing them for the long term, not just the short term. A lovely client sitting at the back there earlier said, does it mean, Bob, changing them for good, they don't ever change again? So it's not that. We want people to carry on changing, but we're keen on developing real behavioral change in our learning outcomes. So we're going to think about how we increase that change, and potentially for you, for me it might be about giving them money back if we don't make people change, but for you it could be about return on investment questions that your organization asks. How do you demonstrate, how do you prove that change is taking place? Well, perhaps more of that at the CIPD course, because I've got a slot there. But we're going to talk about the front end today, which is the piece around how do I construct the knowledge that I need to then create the intervention that changes people. So that's it. That's where we're going. And I've got 3 things in 30 minutes. And they're not in order, really, in terms of not 10 minutes each. I'm going to talk about a principle. Then I want to talk about a process. And then a killer question. And this is just heartland stuff. We're going to lay ourselves bare as an organization and tell you just what we do when we meet organizations and work with them so that you can see how we try and understand the need and develop that need into solution. So hopefully some real good takeaway, whatever part of L&D you're from, whatever organization you're in. So we're going to start with this principle, this idea actually that I think underpins so much about what is really important when we enter into the discussion about changing people. So I've said here, intent is really important. Probably more important than you realize. Now, it's a strange thing, but actually if we have the right intent when we enter into a discussion about changing people for good, that makes a massive difference on the way we do things and the way we go about things. And I want to explore that with you, get some ideas going and perhaps tweet that in a moment or two. But the trouble is, and I think the barrier to this, is often we might have a heart's intent that actually we want to change people within our organizations and help them develop and improve. But very often the mechanics of it, the time pressure of it, the urgency of it, the demands of the day drive us much more towards just putting stuff in place and feeding that into the organization, rather than really having a real focus at the center of what we're doing and saying, okay, my heart is to change these people. Now, I know this sounds really soft, really kind of quite woolly, and I accept that, especially if you've kind of got a bit of a tech orientation about you. But actually, it is important. So I want to go back in my history just to demonstrate why that might be and how that might be. So this is actually a picture of me at school. It's a dreadful picture. It's an old picture, and it's a photograph of an old photograph. And that is a Bflat Tuba. I don't know if any of you know the Bflat Tuba. It is the biggest brass instrument you can find. I'm about 14, I think, in this picture. And I am not wearing trousers. I have got a snorkel on my head, and I was playing a solo called Down at the Deep End. Okay, so hence the flippers and the garb that I was wearing at that point. Now that's there because 2 people made a significant difference in my education when I was a kid. And I would almost be as bold as to say almost only 2 people made a significant change to me as a youngster. I hated school. I really did not enjoy the school experience. I'd much rather be on the dirt track with my old moped and kind of smelling of petrol and, interested in other things. Music, fine. But schooling, it just didn't grab me. And so many of my teachers didn't grab me. Barring Miss Harvey, my primary school teacher, who I remember to this day. This is late 1960s. She's got an enormous beehive. Lovely young lady then, I thought old lady of course, but she got out a box of recorders, took an interest in me, and before I knew it, I was playing 3 Blind Mice and a whole range of other things on the recorder. That went on to middle school, 3 school system, Suffolk. I was born in Suffolk. It's kind of, where a lot of people. You're related to a lot of people most of the time, actually. But I went up to middle school, and Barney Cable, Barney was his nickname because he looked like Barney Rubble, was the music teacher. So I'm 9 years old, he hands me a tuba. It was the E-flat tuba, if you know anything about that, which is slightly smaller at 9 years old, but still a pretty big instrument for a 9-year-old. And my dad made me a trolley, and I wheeled up and down the hill to school and got on the front of the East Anglian Daily Times, actually wheeling this thing about. But Barney Cable was interesting because he took an interest in me, he took an interest in this bunch of young musicians, and took us all over the world. We played at the Royal Albert Hall. We played at St. Mark's Square in Venice on an Easter Sunday. Literally, he would pull up the bus somewhere and we'd get out and put a concert on. And what a great learning experience that was. 2 people who took an interest, had a real passion about what they were doing, and pretty well the biggest 2 people in my school years. I left school, not really proud to say this, with GCSE, no, it wasn't GCSE then, was it? CSE, Grade E English. True. Grade E English. That's how interested I was in school generally. I do have a master's degree now, so I just put your minds at rest, but kind of... now, why go down that route? Why tell you that story? It's because actually people with a heart's intent to make a difference to others are much more able and ready to make a difference. So I want to discuss how that works for us as L&D professionals in organisations, and want to suggest, let's go to an analogy that you will all be so very familiar with. The analogy that the iceberg, the kind of the idea that our values and our beliefs sit under the waterline, they're the invisible things. And above the waterline, the analogy is that we can see the behaviours and the things that are said and done, the witnessable behaviours above the waterline. So what happens when we have a value here? It drives the behaviour. So I have a value. It might be that I trust you as human race, and that might impact my behaviour. So it impacts my behaviour in that my wallet I've left on the stand. Now, I shouldn't have probably said that, should I, out loud? And I might be proven wrong. But reality is, my kind of belief, foolishly or not, has caused me to leave my wallet. And I'm not worrying about that. Now I've just thought about that, because maybe my belief is that society isn't quite as honest as I would like them to be. Now, what happens if we take that idea and we just put at the bottom the intent to change people for good? What would that do to the way in which we approach learning design and interacting with our audience, if you like, or our workforces that we want to bring about a change? Let's play with this for a moment. In your rows, could I ask you to find somebody with Twitter, have a quick conversation, we're talking just a few minutes, just a couple of minutes maximum, and I want you to tweet ideas of behaviours, visible, witnessable, things that would be said and done that would come from the intent to change people for good. If you had a real heart to make a massive difference, let's take the boundaries off. If you had a real heart to alter people's lives for the better, what would you do with those people? What would you say with those people? What's the visible piece of that? So join me with that. Have a quick conversation, pairs, threes, groups. Anyone with Twitter, tweet at iManage anywhere in the tweet. Up here at iManage, all one word. And I will read some of those out as they come. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to have a go at that. Get those conversations going. Okay, first tweet has come in. So it says, ask, don't tell. So important, isn't that? The more we dictate to our audience, the more we'll actually cause them to resist. That is true, How many of you, like me, when the European Union says a banana's got to have a certain curve on it to be a banana, we kind of roll our eyes in the back of our head and say, stuff your bananas, I don't care. But had I have been in Brussels, present with the group, working on defining fruit and veg, I'm sure I'd have been caught up in it. Engage me, and I'll get involved, and I will believe it's important. I'll have my protractor out, and I'll be measuring those bananas, and getting completely caught up in it, because I'm engaged. Ask, don't tell. We've got to stop in L&D pushing solutions at people. I've got a time management course, buy it, or have it. We've got to switch that round to a real pull from our audience. I think that's a really good idea. So what else is coming? Oh, there's several turning up here now. Lou Reed. Not sure what that one's about. Let's try another one. Inspire confidence in themselves. Okay, yeah. Here is, now, this little lad from Suffolk who wasn't academic. That's the reality of it. And the ones that inspired me were those who took that interest, gave me an opportunity, took me places that, a teenage kid would dream of going. That's interesting, isn't it? If we can inspire confidence in people, it's amazing what they can do. I ended up conducting this brass band as a late teenager, standing up in front of great big audiences and leading that. And that's probably why I do this job today, actually. I'm really comfortable at being at the front. But, it just inspires confidence. Give people a success experience. That is so key in this, I think. Okay, what else have we got here? Invest quality time with that individual or group. Yeah. I'm going to give you a process in a moment, to a way of investing that time. But that's so key. We can't do it remote. We've got to have contact. I say remote. I mean, we've done it with technology maybe, but it needs communication. It needs connection. Okay, what else coming through? Any others being offered? It's dried up. It's slowed up for the moment. So maybe we'll come back to that in a second or two. Yeah, thank you. So they don't have Twitter at the front. They need to get Twitter, don't they? But they said, listen. Listen to the audience. Listen to our people. The fiver comes later because that's exactly where we're going with the process. So this is the principle. That's my first idea. The second idea is the process. So let's just flick over to this. This is a technique, a tool that we use every week with prospects, with our clients, in understanding the need and designing solutions that make a difference to people. They are the only 4 types of question you need when you're doing training needs analysis. We use it week in, week out. It's an acronym, SKIN. I told you I got grade E English, but it kind of works. Yeah. Situation, challenge, impact, and need questioning. So this is giving our heart away. When we sit down with clients, we just ask these 4 questions. I've got one killer question that come at the end, 5 questions then, but we just ask situation questions. What's the challenge questions? What's the impact of that challenge? And then we talk about what the need solution might look like. And this is so tried and tested for us, it makes a living for us, because it helps us understand what the organizational change requirement is and then design solutions that meet that. So this is, as it sounds, it's child's play. Tell me about your situation. What are the challenges? What's the impact of that challenge? And how do you see the solution looking? Now, I might take a bit longer about that. I might weave up and down it. I might ask some situation questions, drop into some challenge questions if I think we've got something. And I might go back up to situation questions again before I come down again. But at some point, I'm going to come from challenge into impact, into need. And I can pretty well walk away at that point with a pretty rich understanding of what change we need to bring about in the organization. So can we have a go at this? Can we just pair up maybe in the room a little bit? And again, groups of 3 or something. And I want you to do a training needs analysis in 2 minutes with your colleague, okay? So first, it starts with, what's the situation? Get a bit of situation information. What challenges are you facing? What's the impact of those challenges? And what would the need look like if we went there? So we're going to try this in a moment. Can I just point out something about the impact piece? That's really very important in the diagnosis of the problem, simply because we can't just give people a prescription unless we've diagnosed their need. And people often don't know the need themselves. So if we get them thinking about what the impact of that challenge is, they're much more likely to be ready to take the need at the end of it. It's kind of a light bulb thing. Oh yeah, I can see there's a challenge, and actually I can see there's something we ought to do about that because it's having an impact in some way. And therefore they're more receptive to thinking about the need. Now that works with your internal or external coming in, I'm sure, either way. So let's just pair up. Groups of 3, don't mind. I would like you just to have a go at this. A situation question, a challenge question, an impact question, a need question. Just test it out for 2 minutes for me. Give you the stand to do that. Okay, I don't know how that's going, whether you're through the full cycle yet in some of your conversations, but it's easy. Nothing difficult about that. But what it does do is start to open up an understanding that really taps into the individual or the group that you are talking to really see where I can make a difference. Now, we, as learning development suppliers, you can't make a difference everywhere. You need to focus on those areas you're able to make a difference. So when I'm having those challenge questions, I am looking for those areas where I think, actually, we could do something there. There's an opportunity here to make a difference. And we've got a skill or an approach that might be useful to that group of people. And the key is the solution design has to challenge people. I think if it doesn't bring people to that point of acknowledging they need to change, then you're going to struggle to bring about change. So what we're looking for is what's the uncomfortable piece. On training courses, I would often say I like training that's a bit painful. Like sometimes you might relate to this. My wife gets her thumbs on the sore place in my back. Hurts, but it's nice. It's kind of a bit, but it's good. And we need to create interventions, whether they're technology-led or face-to-face, that are a bit like that have got a bit of bite, that have got a bit of rub, and actually bring people to a point of challenge. If we do that, we're much more likely to bring about change in them. So what are those challenges we want to address? Get the light bulb on with the impact, think about the need. Now here's my final bit, my killer question that I would tend to ask almost every meeting with prospects or clients where we're trying to do this. And it has this idea of knowing where the end is. It's dear old Covey, isn't it? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People start with the end in mind. If we're going to build great learning solutions, what we need to do is cast our vision forward 6 months, a year, and ask, what will that future look like? What would be different if we had put something in place and that had been successful? How would people be behaving differently as a result of that intervention? So my killer question is simply this. I use this in a number of different ways, versions of it, but what constitutes outstanding performance? I would say to the organization I'm working with, if you wind the clock forward 6 months, this has been outstanding in meeting and going beyond your expectations. What would the world look like? What behaviors would be different? What would have changed? What would people be saying that's different? What would people be doing that's different? And so with that, we're starting to invent the picture of the future so that we can design solutions that meet that picture, that start to bring about those desired changes in people. Now, that might be very strategic, it might be very tactical. And I don't mind either of that end, actually. It can fit in with organizational needs strategically, or it can be about individuals who are just a bit rough around the edges and need a bit of polish and smoothing. But if we start to paint the picture of the future in our assessment and our analysis, when we come to design, that gives us so many cues, so many ideas about where do we take this, what intervention would work for this group of people, this individual. So 3 simple ideas that we live with, really. A principle, a real intent to make a difference to people. Then we've got a process, situation, challenge, impact, need. And we kind of got this future idea of a killer question that taps us into the future state of the organization, what it will be like. Now, the challenge in all of that, of course, is doing it in a busy day-to-day when we're working in organizations and we might have thousands of people that we're working with if you're a big corporate. But actually, the more we can move away from that kind of blanket push without listening and shoving solutions at our audiences, and the more we can move away from that and move towards kind of diving deeper with a heart that says, I want to help you, we start to build some really exciting solutions. And we start, actually, as you start to implement those solutions, seeing people really enjoying them. You see the skeptics coming and going out pleasantly surprised and bought in. You see people starting to pull. We'll have a bit more of that. We like that e-learning module. We'll have a bit more of that. And you start to get a complete switch from that push, like cold sales, isn't it? Cold callers. They keep pushing at us and trying to force us to a close. You switch that around completely to people saying, actually, we've got this need now, we've got that need now. Can you help us with that? Help us understand that. So 3 ideas that moves us from a training needs analysis of push to a training needs analysis of pull, with this idea of changing people in the long term. So please do come and talk to us more about that. We've got lots of other ideas about actually how the interventions might be designed as a result of that to get people to change for good. We're Q13, just around the corner here. Love to have a chat with you. Do connect with us at iManage. iManageperformance.com is our website. We'd love to carry on the conversation with you. But thank you for listening.